Okay, you know what this is about. Happens every year, and for most, it's a great break where you get to sit down with friends and family, and just eat some good food. There's a lot that passes through your mind during the entire holiday, and through the minds of company CEOs. Thanksgiving is a very big time for a bunch of different industries who love Thanksgiving for very different reasons than you do. Hint: profit. And the pursuit for more profit does not go victimless. It never does. There's a lot to get to, so let's just start with turkey. Yeah, we're starting with the big bird. From the farm to plate, turkeys typically take up much less resources than beef or cow. But again, the pursuit of profit is not victimless. The demand for turkey is definitely large at Thanksgiving, and companies don't intend to waste this chance. Every year, the pattern is clear. There's a massive spike in turkey production right in the period before Thanksgiving, and companies end up producing so much turkey that turkey prices end up dropping from large increases in supply. There's a lot that goes into making sure that supermarket shelves are packed with all the turkey you could ever want. Not just in the United States either. Supermarkets all over the world need to be ready for Turkey Day. This graph is based on yearly statistics on the export of turkeys, but many other countries do celebrate Thanksgiving, and a good chunk of these exports occur during Thanksgiving, though this is very much based on culture. Thanksgiving is the prime time not only for production of turkey, but for throwing turkey away after you realize you bought way too much. Keep in mind the following point is just going to cover American statistics, not any global statistics, if that makes sense. All the turkey meat thrown away, if gathered and reused, could be used to make another 8.2 million turkeys. And this is just from Thanksgiving. This number consists of 4% of all turkeys produced in the entire year, which means that 4% of all the turkeys produced in the entire year go straight into the landfill as a result of one holiday. And when they're there, you wouldn't believe it, but throwing them away causes even more issues, and these dead turkeys produce even more carbon emissions just sitting there in the landfill. We'll get to that a bit later though. Or I guess now is fine. Back on the topic of carbon emissions in the landfill, you might be wondering, literally how does that even work? If the thrown away meal is not even being burnt or anything, but just sitting there, probably really sad just not being eaten, then how in the world are there more carbon emissions being made? Methane. I guess it makes sense when you think about it, but when food decomposes in the landfills, a byproduct of whatever reaction is going on there is methane gas. Just with Thanksgiving, 798,568 metric tons of methane gas emissions gets down into the atmosphere, all from the wasted food that was thrown out. And methane is even more dangerous to our atmosphere than carbon dioxide is. Statistic being that methane gas has a global warming effect that could possibly be 80 times more dangerous than carbon dioxide. While carbon dioxide is less dangerous than methane, do not underestimate the human talent of being able to produce an insane amount of carbon per year. Something that represents this well is the 5.84 million people that are expected to use air travel this Thanksgiving. Whether it's to visit family or go on vacation, the bottom line is that there's a lot of travel around this time. And this year, 2024, in America, we are expected to top last year's number in air travel, like we usually do. Then on top of this, there's another 71 million people who intend to use their cars to drive where they need to go this year. And you guessed it, that's way more carbon emissions. Now, the average car emits around 411 grams of carbon dioxide per mile. I think it's hard to put some of these numbers into perspective. You'll hear 411 grams and you aren't sure whether or not to be surprised. But I think this graph is a really good way to set the doomsday limit for emissions, or something close to it. This graph shows the chance of keeping global temperature under a certain value based on our amount of CO2 emissions. Here, under 1.5 degrees Celsius, and here under 2 degrees Celsius. This is our budget. This is our limit. Every year we chip away at it with big cultural holidays, especially hitting at the limit with some force from big increases in consumer activity, like Thanksgiving. It may look like these numbers are so far away from each other. Like in 2022, our emissions were only 41 billion tons of CO2, and you might think we have so much more time before we hit the next degree milestone, before we produce enough to be an issue, right? Well, the whole point is that it's a slippery slope. The whole point is that this idea of eventually is going to happen, and turn into happening now. We will reach these large numbers, and in the future, we will regret not having done anything in the past. On top of this, we're doing so much more to hurt our environment than just release CO2. We're way better at warming up the planet than we think we are, as I said previously. And Thanksgiving is a perfect example of all these tiny things that add up. It's shortages upon shortages, temperature increases upon temperature increases, all these little things that you'll just forget about, but they really do build up. I said 411 grams per mile when traveling by car, And now it's obvious 411 grams is barely a scratch on any of these numbers here. But it's all about the slippery slope again. You think something is small, and it might be, but as a result, these small things keep happening since you don't think about it much. And they add up to something larger and larger. I'm sure you've heard this all before, but it's really important, genuinely, to keep stuff like this in mind, especially around the holidays. This is because there are things that you can do. I know there's nothing stopping you from sitting down with your family and having a good meal, right? No one wants to give that up. No one wants to give up Thanksgiving. And you'll always be a consumer in this economy, but there's nothing stopping you from being
Hearing all the discussion about emissions and climate change can be overwhelming. Don't worry though, you can still enjoy the Thanksgiving meal you've been looking forward to all year long. However, before we begin to dive into the ways we can make Thanksgiving more eco-friendly, let's take a quick glance at where it all began. Thanksgiving began around the early 1600s when the pilgrims who sailed from England met the Native Americans. Both cultures had a tradition of celebrating a successful harvest with gratitude. So, Thanksgiving was then born as a day of giving thanks and appreciating what the land provided for them. But most of you probably already knew this. So, let's fast forward a few hundred years. Today, Thanksgiving is about family, gratitude, and, well, of course, a delicious meal. But, as we celebrate, it's worth asking ourselves, how can we show gratitude not just to each other, but to our Earth as well? How can we celebrate in a way that's good for both us and the environment? Here are a few ideas on how to do so. First up, quality over quantity. Plan your meal based on how many people are actually coming. That way, you'll have exactly what you need with no mountains of leftovers to worry about. Well, sometimes this isn't really possible to not let happen. There are other ways to store leftovers, such as freezing, refrigerating, and getting creative. With containers means nothing has to go to waste. And trust me, frozen turkey is still just as good weeks later. And if you're tired of eating turkey sandwiches by day 3, try something new. Turn those leftovers into a soup, stir fry, or even some turkey tacos. However, if you can't seem to come up with something, there are many sources online, and I cooked up something myself using sweet potatoes I had left over. This is one way you can reuse baked sweet potatoes / mashed sweet potatoes using everyday ingredients that are commonly found in just about every household. First, we will start by mashing the cooked sweet potato, if not already done so. Then we will add the rest of our ingredients: breadcrumbs, pressed garlic, salt, and pepper. Then using a cookie scoop or a spoon works just as fine, we will form our cakes. Afterward, we will add the sweet potato cakes to a pan over medium heat with a little vegetable oil. Cook it for about 5 to 7 minutes per side. In the end, your sweet potato cakes should look like this. Definitely less deconstructed than mine. That was an issue I had while flipping them, but that is definitely on my part. However, when you're cooking it, it should come out better. Now, if you aren't the one cooking it and are traveling instead, then maybe you should consider how you are traveling. If you and a lot of your family are traveling and you live in the same area, then maybe consider carpooling to reduce the number of cars used to reduce carbon emissions. Well, yes, I know it may be uncomfortable to carpool, especially when you are traveling a long distance. Trust me, I know. I've gone all the way from New York to Florida by car, and it's a very lengthy ride. However, small things such as carpooling to a destination instead of taking a plane, while it may not seem as much at first, taking a car emits less of a carbon footprint than a plane does. While you may not be able to avoid flight in all circumstances, if you are reasonably able to reach your location by car or over a plane, then do so. If you must fly, the least you can do is ensure your flight is directly to the correct location. Every little thing adds up. The danger of the slippery slope cannot be emphasized enough. Do your part this Thanksgiving. Eat some good food and hang out with family and friends. Give a little thanks to the earth you live on. Have a happy Thanksgiving!